When to stop looking. The 37% rule that changes everything. You know that feeling. It is 2 in the morning and you are lying on the ceiling staring at the bed. Or the other way around. You signed a lease last week and 3 days later a better apartment appeared on the same app, same price, better light, closer to the train. Or you let someone walk out of your life because you figured someone more compatible was just around the corner and now you are not so sure. Or you turned down a job offer while you waited for a dream role that never showed up. That specific flavor of regret, the one that comes from a search that ended wrong, is one of the most universal human experiences. And here is what almost no one tells you. Mathematicians solve this problem. Not metaphorically, literally. There is a provably optimal strategy for when to stop searching and commit. It comes from computer science. It has a name, and once you understand it, the way you think about decisions like this changes permanently. The book that laid all of this out for me is called Algorithms to Live By Brian Christian and Tom Griffiths. The whole premise is that computer scientists have been solving problems that map perfectly onto human life, and we can borrow their answers. Chapter 1 is about optimal stopping, which is just a formal name for the question every person navigates constantly. When do I stop looking and commit? To see why this problem is hard, let me put you in a specific scenario. You are apartment hunting in a city you just moved to. You have 3 weeks before your current housing ends. You start scheduling tours. The first 3 apartments teach you something. You start to understand what a typical place looks like for your budget. The 4th one is noticeably better. Do you sign it? If you do, you commit before seeing the rest of the market. If you keep looking, you risk losing it, and you might not find anything better. This is the trap. Every apartment hunt works this way. So does every job search. So does every relationship. You explore options one at a time. You cannot perfectly predict how good the remaining pool is, and once you pass on something, it is typically gone. Mathematicians formalized this exact structure decades ago. The classic version is called the secretary problem. The setup is clean. You are hiring for one position. Candidates come in one at a time in random order. After each interview, you must decide immediately, hire this person or pass and move to the next. You cannot go back to a candidate you rejected. You cannot hold multiple offers. You interview, you decide, you move on. The question is, what strategy gives you the best mathematical shot at hiring the single best candidate in the pool? Your first instinct might be to interview everyone and compare. But you cannot because you have to decide in real time. Your next instinct might be to grab the first impressive person you see. But how do you know they are impressive if you have nothing to compare them to? You need a baseline. That is the core tension. Gathering enough information to judge quality while not letting all the best options slip by during the gathering phase. The mathematically optimal solution is called the look then leap rule. You divide your search into 2 distinct phases. Phase 1 is pure observation. You interview candidates, you form honest opinions, but you commit to no one. You are building your calibration. You are learning what the market looks like. Then at a very specific point, you flip a switch and enter Phase 2. In Phase 2, you immediately commit to the first person you encounter who is better than everyone you saw in Phase 1. That is the complete strategy. And the specific point where you flip the switch? 37% of the way through your search. If you have 100 candidates, observe the first 37 with 0 commitment, then hire the next person who beats all of them. If you have 30 days to find an apartment, spend the first 11 days just touring, never signing, then sign the first place that beats everything you have seen. If you have 10 job options, use the first 3 or 4 to calibrate your sense of what is available, then take the next one that clears your bar. Here is the part that genuinely stopped me. This strategy gives you a 37% chance of landing the absolute best option. The same number shows up twice. 37% is both the threshold and the success rate. This is not a coincidence. It falls out of the mathematics, specifically from the limit of 1 divided by e, where e is Euler's number, approximately 2.718. The result is both the rule and its payoff, And that symmetry is one of those moments where math does something quietly extraordinary. But 37% sounds low. You might be thinking, even with the perfect strategy, I fail 63% of the time? Yes, that is correct. And here is why that matters more than the number itself. That 63% failure rate is not a flaw in the strategy. It is a built-in feature of the problem. There is no strategy, no intuition, no algorithm, not even a theoretically perfect one, that can do meaningfully better when you are operating without recall, without knowing the pool size in advance. The book makes this observation quietly, but it is one of the most important things I have ever read about decision-making. When behavioral economists study human choices and conclude that we are irrational, they are often studying problems just like this one. And the humans struggling with those problems are not broken. The problems are genuinely hard. That reframing changed something for me. I used to read articles about cognitive biases and feel like the takeaway was that I was a flawed decision maker in need of fixing. Optimal stopping says something different. It says, you are playing a hard game with imperfect tools. Here is the best tool available. And even with it, expect to lose most of the time. That is not pessimism. That is honesty. Now, the classic secretary problem is a clean theoretical model. Real life adds complications, and the researchers explored those too. The variations are where this gets concretely useful for people our age navigating real decisions. The first variation is the rejection problem. In the classic setup, you have all the power, you pick, they comply. But in dating, both people decide. The person you want to commit to might not want to commit to you. A mathematician named Michael Trick worked out what happens under rejection risk. The answer? Commit earlier. Start proposing after just 25% of your search rather than 37%. And instead of stopping at the first person who clears your bar, keep proposing to every new best yet person you meet until someone accepts. You accept more risk of early rejection because the alternative, waiting too long, is worse. The second variation is the recall problem. What if you can go back? What if past options remain available? If recall is possible, the math shifts substantially. You should extend your observation window all the way to 61% of your search. Then, after crossing that threshold, you do not look for the first new option that clears your bar. You go back to the best person you ever saw, the one who got away. This variant shows up in one of the most charming real examples in the book. Johannes Kepler, the astronomer who gave us the laws of planetary motion, was widowed in 1613. He began a deliberate, methodical search for a second wife. He interviewed, and the book uses that word deliberately, 11 women over the course of 2 years. He kept careful notes on each. He kept returning to woman number 5 even as he dutifully met the remaining candidates. He eventually proposed to her, and she accepted. They had 6 children. He later wrote that those were the happiest years of his life. The math suggests that committing around, candidate 7 or 8 would have maximized his odds of finding the ideal match, but reaching back to a past candidate rather than simply taking whoever was in front of him at the end was itself mathematically sound. Kepler was not just a great astronomer. He was also, it turns out, running a reasonable optimal stopping algorithm on his love life. The third variation is the house selling problem. Here you are the seller, not the buyer. Offers arrive sequentially. You cannot know in advance what the best offer will be. The optimal strategy is different from the secretary problem. Before you list, do your market research, set a minimum acceptable price threshold, and then hold it firm regardless of how many offers you have seen or how long you have been waiting. Past rejected offers are sunk costs. You never lower the threshold because time has passed. The threshold is defined by your research, not your impatience. The fourth variation is the one I think about the most, partly because it happens every single week. Parking. You are driving toward your destination on a busy city street. Spots near the entrance are rare and go fast. If you pass too many, you end up far away. If you grab the first open spot you see, you might walk 10 minutes unnecessarily. The look then leap rule applies directly. Decide in advance how far you are willing to walk, drive past spots farther than that threshold to calibrate density, Then take the first spot within your acceptable range. San Francisco actually formalized this thinking at the city level. Their smart parking system targets 85% occupancy per block. That is the mathematical sweet spot. Enough occupied that space is not being wasted, few enough that at least one spot per block is always available. The city is running optimal, stopping at urban scale. What all four of these variations share is the same underlying shape. There is a look phase where you gather information without committing. There is a threshold, sometimes expressed as a percentage of candidates, sometimes as time, sometimes as a price floor. And there is a leap, commit when the first option clears the bar you built during the look phase. The specific numbers shift depending on the problem structure. The two-phase approach does not. Let me bring this back to the ceiling at 2 in the morning. If you have ever lain awake replaying a decision, you now have a framework for understanding what actually happened. Either you leaped too early before you had enough information to recognize quality, or you looked too long past the point where the best options were still available. Both are predictable failure modes, and both are built into the structure of the problem, not evidence of something wrong with you. There is also a quieter lesson embedded in the look-then-leap rule that I think is worth sitting with. The rule validates the look phase as real, purposeful, essential work. Those early apartments you lived in after college were not mistakes. They were your calibration data. Those early relationships that did not go anywhere were not failed attempts at finding the right person. They were your observation window. The math does not just tell you when to leap, it tells you that the look phase has irreplaceable value and that moving through it without committing is not indecision, it is the strategy. You might be wondering where 37% lands in your own life. If you started seriously dating around age 20 and you plan to be settled by your mid-30s, your look phase ends around your mid-20s. If you are 26 and still figuring out what you want in a partner, you are not behind. You are on schedule. If you are job hunting and have access to 10 or 15 realistic options, spend 3 to 5 of them purely learning what the market looks like before you start seriously evaluating. These are not just pieces of advice, they are the output of 60 years of mathematics applied to the problem of choosing under uncertainty. The chapter closes with an observation that I keep returning to. Optimal stopping does not promise the best outcome. It promises the best possible process, given the constraints. The apartment you signed might not be the finest one in the city. The person you are with might not be the single most compatible human on Earth. That is not a failure of the strategy. That is the honest reality of making irreversible decisions, in time, with limited information, in a world that does not hold its best options open while you deliberate. The goal was never certainty. The goal was a defensible process. And now you have one. The next chapter in Algorithms to Live By tackles a different but related tension: explore versus exploit. When do you keep trying new things versus doubling down on what already works? It applies to restaurants, cities, careers, and creative practice. The math there is just as counterintuitive as what we covered today, and I think the conclusion will genuinely surprise you. If you want to find out where that line is, keep this channel close.